Last time, I talked about how to communicate the design choices you've made. Now, I want to wrap up with some reminders about designing to the user's context, for yourself, and for your whole team. Empathy, the capacity to recognize emotions that are being experienced by another person, is one of the many soft skills a great UX team should make core to their process. Empathizing with users leads to a genuine understanding of how to solve their problems, ultimately to building better products. Context is a nice place to start. Their device, their environment, and so on. The needs of this guy, sitting at his desk in a cube farm, are very different from the needs of this guy in a workshop somewhere. If you're designing for use under ideal conditions, or any single set of conditions, you're doing it wrong. We'll focus first on the most basic and beneficial way to get there. Phones and tablets are not desktop computers, or even laptops. You can help yourself a lot by just designing and checking your work at scale. Take the design out of Graphel, Visio, Axure, Photoshop, InDesign, or whatever, and get it off the computer. There's no need for clever prototype tools, though things like Get Launch or PopApp do work well. Just put screens in the device gallery on your phone. You can email them or use something like Dropbox, like I do. Put your designs on the phone whenever you can, or all the time, with things like Edge Inspect or other cross-platform tools. When you can, carry the phone outside and tap on the screen, even if it doesn't work. How it works and looks on the real device in real environments is very different from how it's going to work on a computer in your office. When you're ideating with the team, bring device templates and devices so everyone can not just wave their arms and describe, but try out your product and others and show things off right there in the room. Sketch at device scale, so you start with it being the right size. Avoid too much reliance on your computer screen or on PowerPoint to show it off. Try it out. Pass it around the room to make sure you aren't foolish, or to share the design the way it will really work in meetings with clients or stakeholders. Test, test, test. Test again. Test on real devices, not just emulators. First in your office, like this maybe. When testing responsive websites or any multi-screen experience, do this. Get all the devices out at the same time, and do end-to-end testing to make sure it doesn't just work but makes sense. It's much easier to see mismatches and inconsistencies like this with everything next to each other than testing individually. It's an inherent way that people's brains process stuff. You can see what's different than the others better than you can remember it later on. When it comes time to measure and confirm sizes are correct, do it directly on the device to make sure all your math was right. You can use any old circle template, but I made up my own little tool I keep in my pocket because this is so important. And yes, you can buy one from me if you want to also. Don't just use real devices, but visit or simulate real environments whenever you can. We had one of these prototype kiosks in the office, but one day we drove down the street to a store with them installed as a trial. It was a totally different experience in the actual setting, despite every pixel being exactly the same. People using it in trucks, in auto repair shops, in mines in Brazil, or village clinics in Africa. You can't really tell how it will work from your cubicle in the financial district or a usability lab. Context was denounced a few years back as being too presumptive. What those folks got right was the assumption that mobile was one thing, people on buses and busy executives. But at the same time, they discarded the differences in user context and assumed all desktop computing on the other hand was the same. Now we're proving nothing should be assumed. Desktop computers have touchscreens and can be picked up and carried off these days. Mobile people use their devices in different ways. This guy is on a desktop computer, but his context has almost nothing to do with any office worker. Sitting there in Photoshop or Axure, you could hardly be more removed from him. You can't tell how he works or how his environment changes interaction completely without watching and asking him about it. At its core, we're now talking about research or usability testing, but specifically, I like ethnography. That's just the proper name for getting out in the real world and seeing people work in their real environment. Here, this guy also has a desktop computer, well, a laptop, but it's different from your desktop or the wall-mounted one. And only for now. This stuff is becoming mobilized and fast. Ethnography is also called field research or contextual research. You can do studies much like classic lab usability tests, as well as just observation or inquiry about how they do their work today. But you do it outside the lab. You talk to people, ask them how they do their jobs, and watch them as they work as usual, more or less. You can take notes, Record, photograph. Here we're doing a plain old usability study on a prototype of a mobile app, and the participant is wearing video recording glasses. We do recording literally from the user's point of view. This whole thing is a practice area entirely of its own, so go hire a researcher or a team of them to help you with this if you don't already have the background in it. Don't be too narrowly focused on your test when you visit sites or customers. The classic example is the post-it. If you look at the computer screen, you only get part of the picture. What are users not able to remember and do, so are writing down or reminding themselves how to do with post-its that they tape around their monitor? The photo here is a good example I saw. As part of just testing a product related to connected vehicles, I was on site with these truck maintenance guys. Years into the project, I found this. They are, after many failed attempts to implement devices like the thing he's holding, disappointed with digital record keeping and data collection, so have a room full of cubby holes with paperwork, one for each truck. That had never come up. They didn't think it was worth mentioning. I just stumbled across it. What are you missing by making assumptions about your users or asking questions too narrowly? Now I'm going to finish you off with one last pitfall to watch out for. Disappointingly, we can't as app and web designers and developers think entirely at user scale. There are issues involving the way that device-independent pixels and viewport scaling works. The key issue is that OS makers and device manufacturers hear nothing but your cries of fragmentation to simplify to as few scales as possible. But that means they lie. They group items into a fairly small number of categories. Yes, even Apple. Really, mostly Apple. The iPad mini and iPhone 6 Plus simply lie and rescale everything you do to the next device down the line. And there's no good way around it. Even aside from those lies, the matching between infinite variability in devices and a few classes of pixel scaling means your text, icon, or touch target could be a bit or quite a bit smaller than you planned on. So you make a button 7mm tall to assure people can click it and see it. Make sure that there's no conflicts and they tap something else. You set it to the correct size in device-independent pixels. And when it gets to real phones, it's as small as 5mm. That's often going to be intolerable, bringing your intended size far below useful, or so large nothing fits on the screen. Okay, I lied. I don't want you to end disappointed. Let's all go out energized to improve the world, because we can, as long as we remember to. User experience is about solving problems for people, and not getting caught up in technology. Efficiency improvements should let users get on with their lives faster, not just be more about sales or reducing IT costs. We can do this, and with the reach of mobile, we can do it for huge numbers of people all over the world. If you want to read the articles and research reports this is all based on, see my design pattern wiki, see the references to the side, or just contact me. If you forget any addresses I listed, just Google my name and you'll find me. I'm pretty easy to find on the internet and happy to discuss any of this. You can also ask me to help you address your specific problems or concerns. I've worked with big companies and small, globally and locally, on web, apps, wearables, data, and more. The book Designing Mobile Interfaces is not about how to make the best iOS app, but just like I've talked about here, how to make the best mobile experience, regardless of the technology or technologies you choose or are forced to use. I'd be happy to talk to you about helping you create the best experience for your users.